Hey everyone, how's it going? I wanted to talk about an issue that happens to all of us if you're into sublimation, whether it's tumblers, whether it's mugs, or any type of drinkware substrate. And I've seen it on the groups, on the forums where everybody still complains about it, something that we have all experienced and some of us still experience, and that's the dreaded ghosting, what people refer to as ghosting, when you see these lines here and this there. Now, technically, it's not considered ghosting, it's considered gassing. Now, let me just pause here and say this for the record. My disclaimer, I am no professional. I am not a sublimation expert. I've been doing this about 2 years. I've read a lot of things in forums, on posts, in groups, all over. Watched video many times. I've seen a lot of things and I've picked up tricks, techniques. I've learned a lot in doing so. There are people who have been doing this longer than me, may consider themselves expert. I am not. I'm just giving you my thoughts and gonna share with you some of my tips and my tricks and my methods that work for me and has brought me success in sublimating tumblers and mugs. So as I said, this here, people refer to as ghosting. It's really not. It's considered gassing when you have air pockets, when your seams are not tight enough, whether it's around the bottom, on the top, along the edges where your paper meets. You're not creating a tight enough seal, and there are air pockets that are created, and your paper is not setting properly, tightly against the substrate. Ghosting would be this, when you have this double image like that. This happened to me when I removed the tumbler from the press, and I didn't realize the paper had shifted in doing so, and I set it aside. The substrate was still hot, the paper was still hot, the ink was still sublimating onto the surface, and that's what happened. That's your ghosting right there, when you have that double image. You see that? That happens. The other side actually came out perfect because it didn't shift. It came out nice and clean and crisp. This side screwed up on me. This has happened to me many times. It's happened to a lot of people. It continues to happen to a lot of people. So I'm hoping I can share with you some of the things that work for me. It's happened in various occasions using different methods. So this one here occurred when I wrapped it around and I didn't tighten the paper and the tape tight enough around it. I did this one in an oven. I did this one in a press. And according to the place where I bought the press from, the group should I say, it was recommended you don't need to tape the edges at all. And they tape very minimal along the seam, and that's it, leaving the top and bottom exposed. This is what happened to me. Why? Once again, the element on the tumbler press didn't wrap tightly enough around it. So that happened. This one here is my own personal one. You can see I've got color fading. It's happened. I improved my technique a little bit to wrap around, but not tight enough. So I've got some discoloration there. It wasn't tight enough. I don't care. This is my own. What I do care is for my customers. I don't need my customers to get something that looks like that. That's not right, you know. There are many people, and more power to them. It works. Keep doing it. They cut their images shorter than the bottom or the top of their tumbler. And again, this goes back to measuring your tumbler. Always. All tumblers are different. Just because you got a batch of 50, don't take it for granted that those 50 will be exact in size. They vary. So you need to check your tumblers to make sure that the template you're using, whatever size it may be, it covers the top, bottom, or it stops wherever you want it to be, depending on you, your style, and most importantly, your customers, right? Because they're paying for it. So these things have happened to me a lot. After trial and error using different things, yes, I've used the silicone wraps at the bottom. I've tried that along with a little tape beforehand. Sorry about the shifting of the camera. But I just found that it wasn't wrapping around the bottom tight enough and still created some air pockets in there, right? I've also tried on my mug, I use a silicone wrap. I have success with this if I'm using a smaller image, not a full image, but if I'm using a full image, again, when you wrap it tightly around it, I found that it doesn't cover enough along the edge, and I still got a little bit of that gassing effect happening at the top and the bottom. So I tried these different things. They work. They work for a lot of people. There is one full wrap, a silicone wrap that you can buy, a sleeve, if you will, that goes entirely around the tumbler. I haven't used that, but what works for me, what has brought me success, and what has given me these results right here, clean edges on the bottom, clean edges on the top. Here's another, clean edges at the bottom. Almost, it still happens. See, my seams are not invisible. I still have some that have seams, but these are bearable, right? Sometimes your seam can be so perfect that you don't even see it in there. I can see it, but it's in there, a very thin line. But my bottom comes out as I want it to be. So these things work for me, and it's worked in various styles, various colors, you know, a few errors still here at the very, very bottom, if you can see that. But because it's at the bottom, you can't see it when the tumbler is standing straight. And here's another one in a solid color red that has worked very, very well. Again, the seams are not 100%. Not everything comes out 100%. I've been very close, very successful at times too, if it's almost invisible, but they still happen. Those you can live with. Those I don't have an issue with selling because they're not that noticeable. But mistakes like these, I can't do that. I'm not gonna give that, even as a gift, I'm not gonna give that to somebody. I don't think that's good work. So I'll just reburn this and put something else over it, or maybe I get into some epoxy and glitter, and or maybe some kind of a wrap on there myself. But let me set up my table. Let me show you just quickly my techniques, what I do, how I wrap it. It might be overkill for some, but hey, it's working for me, right? That's what matters. Be right back. Okay, we're back. I have my image printed out. This image here is what I'm gonna put on the tumbler, and I'll show you how I wrap it. But let me answer the first question that you're gonna ask. Everyone asks this in all the forums, in all the groups, everywhere. What type of paper do you use? And there are so many different types of paper. I started with a sub that I would buy on Amazon, and it gave me great results. I have no issues with it at all. The 125G, the 125 grams. Then I moved to crafting Besties, which is what this is here. I heard a lot of people in the forums and in the groups raving about this paper. I use it. I love it. I have to say, this works for me. I also just recently purchased HTV Run. I've been seeing a lot of TikTok videos, a lot of groups where people are saying that this paper is really, really good. Again, the ink release is incredible. I have tested it on about 10 tumblers. I love it as well. Can I tell the difference in quality of the ink release and what I'm producing? I don't think so. Maybe I'm not trained that well to notice it. Maybe my eyes are not that good that I can see the difference, but the paper works. I will say this, it's a little bit cheaper on Amazon. So I use that also, but I've been using Crafting Besties for quite a while now. I've also used it on sublimation for my shirts. I love the ink release. It works for me. So, as you can see, I trimmed it down very, very quickly. My image size, I use Photoshop. I use a standard 9.3 in width by an 8.2 in height. All right, I should have left it that way. 9.3 in width, 8.2 in height. It works for me for the tumblers that I've been purchasing, and I measured them all. They're consistent to this template. And as you can see here, I trim very, very little. I don't know if you can see, it's a hairline of what I trim. I just go a little bit on the inked surface and I cut that much. Now, when I wrap it around the tumbler, I will double check. And as you can see, I don't handle my tumbler with my fingers. I don't touch it. Once I clean it with my microfiber cloth, I put my hand inside. I do not touch it. Why? The oils from your fingertips are a killer on many different things, not just sublimation. I try not to touch the paper as well. I try to grab it from the corners as best I can. Sometimes I missed, but and I put my tumbler in, and then I look at my top right there. Hope you can see that. And I bring my tumbler up as close as I can to that edging, giving a little tiny bit of overlap. Let's hope you can see that. And then when I wrap it around, I check to see how much of an overlap there is once I have it centered properly. So again, I bring it up as close as I can to that edge, but I still want to expose a little bit of the edge, a very little bit. And then I check my bottom, and I know it's going to wrap just a little bit around that bottom. See that? All right, so I've got my image just about to the edge, nice and clean there. If my image was taller, I would let it run over. I don't care, but for this template size, it works for me. I've got my little pencil mark there, which indicates where the lines are, and I'm hoping my vision is good enough to see that I did it correctly. And I also check inside and make sure that my two seams here, that they line up. And now it's just a matter of pulling it tight together right in the center there. I push on one end and on the other. I take my 1-inch wide tape or 3/4 inch, whatever you call it there, and I put my first piece. Then I bring it down and I push in again. Get another piece of tape. Now, taping, that's all up to you. Some people use very little tape. Some people use a lot of tape. Some people use this heat tape and others use painter's tape, masking tape. Whatever works for you, your budget, your results, stick to it. I am not going to tell you differently. This is what I do. I use 5 pieces just like that. And right after doing this, take my trusty little scissor. You can use anything you want. You can use a credit card. You can use one of these. This is like a dabber for glue. You take glue and you dab it when you're doing arts and crafts. Bought that on Amazon in a kit. But I just use the back of my scissor. You can use whatever you want. You can use your nail. And I just press down on the tape on all of them very quickly, just like this. And then I go along the edges on the seam right there. And I just make sure I get a tight seal there. Now you can see I've got a little raise right here. I'm going to take care of that when I put my long strip down along that seam. Then I rub the other way horizontally with the back of the scissor as well. And that takes care of that. I just make sure that I have good tight seal on those taped areas. Now, at the bottom, I don't trim anything yet. I trim it after. I take a little piece of tape here, one little piece like that, flip it over again, run my scissor along that side. I will come back and trim that. That is too long for me. I used to leave that, and that's what would happen with my gassing. I'm coming to the other end now. This I'm going to trim completely. This is running a solid edge all on the inside there. So I'm just going to trim with my same little scissor right along that edge. I hope I'm capturing all of this so you can see. I have a video where I did this at high speed. I posted it on TikTok. Everybody's like, it's too fast. I didn't see what you did there. So maybe this will give you a better explanation. Another piece right here. Do I have to? Probably not, but I put it to secure it while I'm doing everything else. I don't want the paper to shift on me. I put a piece there. Now I come to the bottom, and Depending on the image size, the length, the tumbler, whatever I'm using, this can vary, but that's a lot of excess paper to fold over. Will it fold over? Yes, but I don't like it. I don't want it. I'm gonna trim about half of that right off there. Is this a lot of work? Yeah. Do I mind? No. Why? Because it works. For me, it works. All right? So now that I have that little bit there, more work. Again, because it works for me. I take my trusty little scissor here and I create these little snips right at the end there, probably about a 16th to an 1/8 inch apart. But I trim, and then I just rub my hand over it just to give it a little wrap around the bottom. So you can already see it wraps easier because I put those little cuts in the paper there. All right, now I take my tape, my trusty tape, and I'm gonna run it along that bottom seam first. And I'm gonna start right there so I know where I started, right around that center. I'm a little bit below the line, and then I just start working my way up towards the edge until I meet the piece of tape, and now I come completely around that edge. And I still hope you can see this. And once I go completely around, I'll trim my tape and just let it fold over. Now I missed a little spot there, but that's okay. It's gonna get pressed up against it. I don't need to put a piece of tape in there, but what I do need to do is make sure that these edges are as flat as possible. So I run the back of my scissor. Again, you can use a nail, you can use your finger, you can use whatever you like. This scissor works for me in all aspects. I use it for everything. I make sure these little marks here where it sees the line of the paper folding over are smooth. And that's done, and I leave that. Now I go to the other end, I do the same thing. I put my paper halfway, I put my tape rather, halfway on the edge. I allow it to wrap over, and I'm pulling fairly tightly, but not to the point where I feel like it's gonna snap the tape. And I'm just gonna go completely around once. You can wrap as many times as you like, and then run my finger along the top edge so I know it's folding over well, and then just run it along the inside. I'm trying to get everything I'm doing in camera so you can see. So I just folded it over the tape into the tumbler. You see that? And now again with my trusty scissor, I'm just gonna run it along that edge and the top edge. The top edge here and the top edge on the side here. And once I feel I have a good seal there, my last strip is gonna go here, and I do that from bottom to the top. Putting it down there, I pull it taut just a little bit, and I run my finger along the edge to press down and hopefully get rid of any air pockets that I may have in there. Trim it down a little, fold it over. What are we using? The trusty scissor again, running it along that edge to flatten out the tape, and then at the seam, the back of the scissor, I use the seam. Use your nail, use a credit card, use whatever you have available, as long as it's something that will give you a good tight seal on that edge. And hopefully, these results will come out the way I want them to. Is it 100%? Not always. That is how I wrap my tumbler. I wrap it the same way, whether I'm using an oven, whether I'm using my press. Either or, I wrap it exactly the same way. I wrap it the same way if I'm using a full color image like this, top to bottom, or if I'm just using something that has an image on one side. I don't want any chance of air getting into that surface and the paper, and I don't want any chance of ghosting, where the paper could be loose and not pressing down. So when I put it, let's say, in the press and I do the half turn like everyone does, you don't want to take the chance that that area that is not pressing down tight enough will press down at a different position and you get that slight chance of ghosting. I don't want that. So my paper feels relatively tight all around. I'm happy with this wrap. Now it's time to go to the press and get it done. All right, so we're at the tumbler press. I've got it set at 351. You'll see it alternate 351, 349, but my temperature is set at 351. Why? Because my actual element on the tumbler press runs a little bit hotter than that. It varies. Sometimes it goes up to 360, 362, plus or minus. You need a heat gun. Always use a heat gun, whether you're using a tumbler press or a regular heat press for clothing. You want to make sure that your element, your platen, is at the proper temperature needed for that application. And you need to check in various spots. Three spots across would be good, center, left, and right. On a heat press, you should check 9 spots, all the corners, sides, and the center. So that way you know exactly what temperature you're running at. All machinery is different. Everything runs at different temperatures, different times, different settings. It could be the area that you're in, where you live. It causes, a different type of finish. So temperature is something that you need to check constantly. So you'll see it's flipping back and forth, 351, 349. It's ready. I do what a lot of people have recommended. I start out with the tape facing me in one direction, and then I flip 180 degrees and put it in the opposite way. I also add a little extra 15 seconds or so. I turn it just a little bit facing up. And people do different methods of turning. You can face it away, face it towards you. You start out wherever you want, as long as you know which way it's facing. So I start with the tape line facing me. I pop it in, press down. It's set at 40 seconds. And we're coming down to the final seconds where I'm going to turn, pop it open, make my 180-degree turn back in the tumbler, press it down for another 40 seconds. Again, time and temperature vary for everyone, every area, every piece of machinery. So you need to find what they call your sweet spot. Every machine has its own sweet spot. Whatever works for you, whatever works for it, that's what's going to give you the best results. We're coming down to the final seconds. I used to stop here, but now as a little added extra, I just turn it another quarter turn or so. I leave it in for 15 more seconds. So at 25 or so, I'm gonna stop it and pull it out. Is it needed? I don't think so. I've had good results. I'm just doing it for an extra assurance, and that's it. I'm done. Turn my press off, take my tumbler. I cool it in water. I'm gonna get back to you and tell you something about that. All right, so I let it cool under cold running water. Now, there are several people that I've seen that throw it into a bucket or a pail of ice water to let it cool off. And there are some people that don't do anything at all. That's all good, whatever works for you. But there are some people who say and recommend that it causes some kind of damage to the tumbler structure itself. I don't understand that. All I know is from what I've read is you want to stop the sublimation process. Everything I've seen on YouTube videos, from forums, and in various groups, you want to stop the sublimation process, because if you leave the paper on there too long, it's still hot, the substrate is hot, you can cause continuing sublimation, and that may cause your ghosting, your double image. For me, from what I've seen, people cool it off immediately. It stops that process, and now you just peel it off. So this works for me. It may not work for everybody. And I normally do this at the sink after I let it run under cold water for, a minute, maybe less than that. I come and I take off the tape. So I'm gonna do it here so no one thinks that I switch tumblers or anything like that. I just pull my tape right off. I am not switching any tumblers. See if I can find the seam here for my tape. and peel this off. There's the top piece. Here's my tape. It's a mess. As I said, I normally do this over there by the sink in the trash bin, but I'm doing it here. And should I take that off one by one, those pieces of tape? I could, but I don't. I just peel it right off completely. And there's my tumbler. And there's my bottom, if you can see. I have a little white spot right there. That, I believe, is my seam. I think that's actually, yeah, that might not even, that might be paper. I just rubbed it off. Oh, I rubbed it off. But I do have a tiny little line right there with my pointer. But my seams at the bottom, I'm very happy with this because when you stand it up, you cannot see. That's a pretty damn good seam at my bottom. My top is good. I'm happy with it. Again, that white is actual paper. Because normally what I do is once I peel it off, I wash it immediately. I got to go and wash it. I rinse it, I wash it with a mild soap and a very soft cloth. I clean off any residue that might be on the tumbler, as there is some now, and I make sure that I wash that inside very, very well, because whatever's in there may have cooked in there. I wipe it, I clean it before I do it, and I wipe it and clean it after I do it. So when I sell my tumblers or give them away or drink out of them myself, they're very clean. But this was a success for me. I'm loving the colors. I'm loving the template clarity of it. Most of all, I love my taping. I gotta go take all that excess off. I'll bring it back to the sink and wash it. But I'm very happy with it. These are my methods. Whatever's working for you, continue to do so. You don't have to take my advice. It's just I wanted to go over some of the misconceptions about ghosting and gassing, the differences, and how you can try your very best to avoid them, to produce a better product for yourself, for your friends, family, and most importantly for your customers, because you're selling these. You want to make money, so you want that to come back, right? I hope it helps. You have any questions, find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on TikTok. You can ask me anything at all. All right? Thank you. Have a great day.